No, I know.
Now you can tell them this is right.
Oh, I see.
She said,
Yeah.
that's true.
Maybe not, maybe not. We look for
All right. So,
we're working during the day.
at the Congregational Church of Bethel.
Beyond the
Yeah, straight from the-
Yeah, how are you doing?
Yeah, you did the Christmas service there.
Yes, at your church. Yes. It's good to get here.
Yeah, we had.
They did it at the UU church too one year. That's the one I attended.
Yeah,
She does a nice job with that.
it was fantastic. Well, it coincided with something we decided to create our own.
Sure.
So we learned,
Yes, the annotated edition.
thankfully you taught us.
Oh, those songs.
Was that fun?
Real songs.
Well, that, you know, you just internet. And you go and talk to there's all sorts of songs that people say. So,
Good to see you too. Yeah, right.
What I see there is.
I will remember that. I made the 6.
Yeah, I know. You know, if it was done in time, it'd be.
More dudes standing outside.
Speaking of so
This is under setting.
I'm sure you had to do it.
I just want to know my clothes.
Yes. It's an easy way. It's a very easy way.
so they say.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's a very meaningful service for us, as you can imagine, and for everybody, really. We're gonna sing the song that we sing on this service every year, I Still Believe. Right now, I might sing the first song, which is the words on the opening page in the cover, just as sort of a little background. And if you know it and you'd like to join in, please do. It's called Open Up Our Eyes. Open up our eyes Teach us how to live. Fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Leave us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live. Fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name, and we will know that you are one. Open up our eyes, teach us how to live. Fill our hearts with joy and all the love you have to give. Gather us in peace as you lead us to your name. We will know that you are one. We will know that you are one. We will know that you are one. And up for now.
It's beautiful. Thanks. Shabbat Shalom. It's so good to see all of you here. And I just have a brief introduction in keeping with the Saints. And I'm Robin Frisch, the president of Temple Shalom Emeth. And just again, so glad that you're all here with us. In keeping with the sanctity of this space and this holiday, please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices. If you have circumstances that require you to remain in contact with others, please turn your phone to vibrate and fully exit the sanctuary before you begin speaking. We thank you. Should there be, and it's very unlikely, but should there be a situation requiring evacuation, there are two exits, the front doors from which you have entered and the emergency exit to the left of the bima. Please follow the instructions of the security team and the ushers. Security members, you can identify them because we all have red lanyards. Our name tags are on red lanyards. So anybody with a red lanyard is especially trained to help you in any way you need, and will assist you to safety. And also, again, very unlikely, but so you all know, there's a defibrillator as well as a stop the bleed kit in the lobby near the hallway entrance. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Robin. Well, Shabbat Shalom again. And now I hope you will join me in the next song that we do, which we like to open this service with each year. Very pretty song written by a cantor named Marshall Portnoy. A song called I Still Believe. Kind of represents the thoughts, potentially the thoughts of Anne Frank as she hid in Germany. A mixture of hope, sadness, but also hope. cloudless skies of blue. Through the window crack I see you, and I long to run and touch the sun. Dear diary, what else can I do? Growing up and longing for a friend, hoping that our secret life will end in words of light written in the night, my thoughts and hopes and dreams to you I send. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people really are good at heart. And the skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start. Dreaming of the precious air of freedom, waking and I feel like crying. There's no place to go, but still I know skies are clearing, birds are flying. Happiness and love that I can share in a world of truth and beauty. When the thunder's near and when I fear, the light of morning dawn will come to me. I still believe, in spite of everything, that people really are good at heart. And the skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start. The skies will be bright, and it will all come right, and the springtime of peace will start.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Nice to see you all here. And I looked up today on the internet. I was curious how many actual Holocaust survivors are still living today, and it's there are 196,000 Holocaust survivors in the world, still alive in the world, and the youngest one is 80. And so every year we lose more and more people who are personal witnesses to the atrocities, and so it's more and more important for us to embody these memories within ourselves and to keep them alive, and particularly in this time when it seems like we always said it could never happen again, and it always seems to be moving in a direction where things seem more and more familiar to what they were in Germany and Europe in the 1930s. So for so many reasons, it's so important that we're here to commemorate this occasion and to keep it in our hearts. So please rise in body or spirit. You may be seated. And we're now going to continue on page 3 of our pamphlets with the lighting of the Shabbat candles. I'd like to invite Shelley Rosenbaum-Littman, past president of our temple, who's also sponsoring the Oneg Shabbat this evening.
These Shabbat candles remind us of the generations of Israel who kindled light. On this night, we remember those whose lives were extinguished by those who sought to destroy our people and our traditions. As these Shabbat candles give light to all of us who behold them, so may our united presence here this evening be a beacon of light against all those who continue to harbor prejudice and hatred in their hearts. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Praise be our eternal God, ruler of the universe. You hallow us with mitzvot and command us to kindle the lights of Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen, 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 amen.
It is hard to understand why people kill each other. It is even harder to think that 6 million Jews out of 5 million people of other faiths were murdered by the Nazis. It's hard to understand how or why this horrible tragedy took place, but we must never forget. For if we forget that it happened, it could happen again.
We rise in body or spirit for our call to worship the Baruch Hu. Praise the one to whom praise is due. Praise be the one to whom praise is due, now and forever.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Hamavorach Leolam Va'ed.
We're going to continue on page 4 as we read together. Everyone in English. O God, how can we know you? Where can we find you? You are as close to us as breathing, yet you are farther than the farthermost star. You are as mysterious as the vast solitudes of the night, yet as familiar to us as the light of the sun.
In the 1930s, Hitler and the Nazis began to teach people that the Jews were an inferior race of people. They made Jews leave their homes and live in overcrowded apartments without enough food or money. We remember the 210,000 Jews who were killed in Germany and Austria.
The Nazis began to convince more people that their lives would be better without the Jews. In November 1938, on a night we call Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass, they destroyed many of the Jews' stores and burned down their beautiful synagogues. We remember 90,000 Jews who were killed in France.
Then the Nazis told people that the Jews must be annihilated in order to purify the world. They began to send the Jews to labor camps where they told the Jews they would have a better life. Instead, they had to work all day for the Nazis, digging ditches or breaking rocks in the hot sun. All they were given to eat was a little bit of bread and watered-down soup. When they were too weak to work, the Nazis killed them. We remember the 450,000 Jews who were killed in Hungary.
For over 5 years, the Nazis made more and more Jews leave their homes and move to concentration camps or ghettos. There, the sick, the old, the young were separated from their families and killed. We remember the 75,000 Jews who were killed in Slovakia.
When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when to the last full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then your goodness enters our lives and we can begin to change the world. And then you live within our hearts and we through righteousness behold your presence. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God, the eternal God alone. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Va'ed.
Please be seated. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Set these words which I command you this day upon your heart. Teach them faithfully to your children. Speak of them in your home and on our way, when you lie down and when you rise up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand. Let them be a symbol before your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Be mindful of all my mitzvot and do them. So shall you consecrate yourselves to your God. I, the Lord, am your God, who let you out of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, am your God. I, the Eternal, have called you to righteousness and taken you by the hand and kept you. I have made you a covenant people, a light to the nations.
Many Jews did not let the Nazis kill them without struggling to stay alive. Many Jews helped each other find enough food and clothing, though the Nazis wanted them to starve. There were many Christians who risked their own lives by hiding Jews in their homes and helping them to escape. We remember the 40,000 Jews who were killed in Belgium.
You who worship gods that cannot save you, hear the words of the Eternal One. I am God, there is none else.
Some young Jews began to steal guns and ammunition. They fought against the Nazis and helped many people escape to countries where they could live in safety. We remember the 600,000 Jews who were killed in Romania.
Hate evil and love what is good. Let justice well up as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream.
Soon there were so many Jews fighting the Nazis in certain communities that it took a long time, sometimes even years, for the Nazi to defeat them. Remember the 3 million Jews who were killed in Poland. Among them were the Jews who fought to defend the Warsaw Ghetto.
You shall not oppress your neighbors nor rob them. You shall not stand idle while your neighbor bleeds. Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, desolation and destruction within your borders. All your children will be taught of your God, and great shall be the peace of your children. Okay, I continue with the singing of Mi Chamocha on page 7.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. Nora tehilot osefele. Nora tehilot osefele. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, Bokeyayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, ve'eli anu ve'amaru, ve'eli anu ve'amaru. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed.
We rise in body or spirit for the next section of our service called the tefillah, which means the prayer.
Anananananana Adonai. Anananananana sfatai tiftach. Anananananana ufi yagid. Ufi yagid tehilatecha. Anananananana Adonai. Anananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagid. Ufi yagid tehilatecha. Anananananana Adonai. Anananananana sfatai tiftach. Ananananana ufi yagid. Ufi yagid tehilatecha.
Page 8.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Himotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Leah v'Elohei Rachel Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomer Chasadim Tovim V'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevi ge'ula livnei v'nehem, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
Together. Praise be our God, the God of our fathers and mothers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob, God of Sarah, God of Rebekah, God of Leah, and God of Rachel. Great, mighty, and awesome God, God supreme, ruler of all the living, your ways are ways of love. You remember the faithfulness of our ancestors, and in love bring redemption to their children for the sake of your name. You are our sovereign and our help, our Redeemer and our shield. We praise you, Eternal One, Shield of Abraham, Protector of Sarah. Continue on page 9. Please be seated.
The most powerful weapons the Jews possessed against the Nazis were their religion and their traditions. By secretly praying, observing Jewish holidays, and learning about their Judaism, the Jews maintained their faith and their hope, even though they lived under terrible conditions. We remember the 60,000 Jews who were killed in Greece.
The following poem was written by Eva Pikova, a 12-year-old girl who was forced to live in a ghetto. It gives us some insight into how desperately the Jews hoped that things would get better. Today, the ghetto knows a different fear. Close in its grip, death holds an icy knife. An evil sickness spreads a terror in its wake. The victims of its shadow weep in writhe.
Today, a father's heartbeat tells his fright, and mothers bend their heads into their hands. Now, children choke and die with typhus here. A bitter tax is taken from their hands. We remember the 228,000 Jews who died in the Baltic countries.
My heart still beats inside my chest while friends depart for other worlds. Perhaps it's better, who can say, than watching this to die today? Oh no, my God, we want to live, not watch our numbers melt away. We want to have a better world. We want to work. We must not die. We remember the 900,000 Jews who died in Ukraine.
Many Jews who lived under the threat of the Holocaust formed groups and went to live in Palestine before the Nazis got to them. There they built cities and towns and set the stage for the founding of the State of Israel, a safe haven for the Jewish people. We remember the 105,000 Jews who were killed in the Netherlands.
Thousands of Jews tried to flee to the United States, but there were strict quotas here and many were turned away. An ocean liner called the St. Louis brought hundreds of refugees to our shores, but our government forced the boat to return to Europe, where most of the passengers were killed by the Nazis. We remember the 352,000 Jews who were killed in Russia.
By the end of the war, 6 million Jews had been murdered, along with 5 million people of other faiths. But millions of Jews also survived. When the Americans came to liberate them, they found many who were so malnourished that they were hovering between life and death. Most of them could not return to their homes because they had been destroyed. Many were separated from their families and had no way of knowing which relatives were still alive. We bear witness to the 11 million. Their memories live on in us.
The Holocaust reminds us that freedom is precious. It reminds us that there are many peoples around the world today who are oppressed because of their race, religion, ethnic background, sexual orientation, and their place in society. They need our help.
Who among us can be certain that if we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, that we would not cooperate with the forces of evil? Are we in some way doing exactly that by our subtle racism, our lack of interest in war-torn nations around the world, our deliberate ignorance of genocide through starvation that some people are experiencing this very minute as we sit here? Dr. Harry Kargas. First, they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Pastor Martin Niemöller.
Please join me at the top of page 11 in singing of Shalom Rab. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. Shalom Rab al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon v'chol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon v'chol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol ein u'b'chol sha'a b'shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasib Leolam. Tasib Leolam. Tasib Leolam.
God of peace, of justice, and of love, be praised. Inspire us to banish forever hatred, war, and bloodshed. Help us to establish forever one human family united in peace. God of peace, bless us with peace. We must never forget the horrible things that happened in the Holocaust, because if we forget and allow the world to forget, it could happen again. We pause for a moment of silent prayer.
And now please join me in another song for peace called Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Bi'al Kol Yisrael Bimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Bi'al Kol Yisrael Bimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav Yaseh Shalom Aleinu Bi'al Kol Yisrael Bimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Bimromav
Shabbat Shalom again. It's our tradition on this Holocaust Memorial Day service to have an actual survivor speak, and Chaim and Shalva, who are both Holocaust survivors, have both spoken, and we've had many, many other people. Of course, every year that gets more and more challenging. And so Shelley actually said that she heard Rita Goldberg speak a couple of times, and she was so very inspired by her moving words that she highly recommended that she come and speak for us this evening. She's the author of Motherhood, and she's the child of survivors, and it's a fascinating account of coming to terms with her parents' legacy. And so her title this evening, very, very appropriately, is called Remembering the Holocaust, More Urgent Today Than Ever. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to come on up and tell us your story.
Thank you so much. Would I just do a bit of water first? But that's not on the clock, is it? No. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. I never get a response like that outside of a synagogue. And let me just bring up, when I normally give this talk, let me have a drink of water first. It takes me an hour or more because the story takes just that long to tell. And now that I know that there are survivors here, I'm sure you have the same feeling I do, which was that it was very hard to sit through this part of the service. And I was too choked up even to sing. But nevertheless, forward we go. This is my book, Motherland, Growing Up with the Holocaust. It has a picture of my mother holding me, and I am apparently clutching this necklace, which my father gave to her after I was born almost in Israel. He bought this in Israel. Anyway, that's not really relevant here. I guess I'll start not with my own mother's childhood, but with the fact that her family came from Berlin, where the two children were born, to Amsterdam in 1929. My mother, born in 1925, was 4, and her older brother, Jo, was at that time, he was 4 years older, so he was 8. They came speaking only German, and they came because of the tremendous economic crisis caused by the punishments after World War I that the Allies inflicted on the Germans. And I could say a lot more about that too. In 1933, they were joined by Otto Frank and family, who were very close friends of theirs. Both my grandfather, Walter, and Otto founded the first Reform synagogue in the Netherlands. And my grandfather his 50th birthday was celebrated at the synagogue because he was the president of it. And just a week later, the Nazis invaded the Netherlands. That was in the May of 1940. They had also invaded Belgium and eventually France in that month. And my mother at that time was 15. At first, things seemed quite calm. And then very quickly, all the punishments started. My mother, who was a very keen rower in her, I guess the equivalent of a sort of 8th grade class, was thrown out of school and thrown out of that was the end of her rowing career and also the end of her academic career. She realized that her dream of being a pediatrician could never be fulfilled. And while her friends, the Frank sisters, Anna and Margot, went to the segregated Jewish school that was offered them, my mother, who was always very energetic and practical, wanted to work with little children in some other way. And her mother got her a job at the crèche, which is the European word for a daycare center, really, on the edge of what had been the Jewish area of Amsterdam, though never a ghetto. It was also near where Rembrandt lived, and his house is still there as well. And she was taken in, although she was only 16 by the fall of 1940. I guess it was still 1940, 41. Normally, they only took people at 18, but because all the Jewish doctors and nurses had been thrown out of the hospitals, they came to teach the young women at the crèche. And so they had a fantastic education, not just daycare, not just child rearing, but also medicine. And so my mother was able to work as a nurse as well. But more important, that was the beginning of her career as a resistance fighter. By then, Anna and Margot, whom my mother had known, especially when they were 12 and going to their rabbi's house on Sundays, where the young people could talk together. He was later killed at Auschwitz, the young rabbi. They had heard that the Franks had gone safely to Switzerland, to the town, in fact, that I was born in 1949, Basel, where their relatives lived. But of course, they had gone into hiding in the secret annex, and nobody knew that. And they were all rejoicing for them because they thought they were safe. Meanwhile, my mother became a member of the resistance pretty quickly, because the creche was at first an open place for all children, all poor children, not specifically for Jews, but once the Nazis really started their regime and started, can you all hear me clearly? I'm trying to talk fast because I only have a short time. Thank you very much. I'm an expert at this, really, because we do the same thing in Lexington. But anyway, thank you. She began working to save the children in the creche from deportation. And the way this worked was that Amsterdam was already a much more modern city than any American city at the time. It had excellent transportation, all kinds of other facilities. And so the daycare center, the creche, which still exists as a daycare center now called the Anne Frank creche, was across the street from what had originally been called the Dutch theater, the Hollandse Schouwburg, and became the Jewish theater once everything was segregated. And once the raid started, they had a terrible word, which I'm sure you know. They were called in German Razzien, which sounds as evil as it is. When those raids started in the streets of Amsterdam, at first, all the Jews were brought to the Jewish theater. And you can imagine, you've all been to the theater, what it's like to languish there for weeks in those seats and with those terrible bathrooms. And disease and such things quickly became rampant. But there was a secret helper whom all the young girls thought was a traitor because he hung around with the Nazis. But actually, he was sort of a Schindler figure. And he worked to allow the young women, because one thing my mother always said was the Germans loved a uniform. And the women these young girls were in nurses' uniforms with white flowing veils and stuff like that. And they were impressed. Even the German soldiers were impressed by that. So they would come in with laundry baskets covered with a sheet, and they would talk to the mothers of young children and ask them if they wanted to take the chance on their taking the children away so that they could be saved. Can you imagine being a mother in that position? Many of them said no, which was quite understandable. And every one of those children died in the deportations to the East. I can remind you that children were seen as particularly dangerous offspring of the rodents that Jews were thought to be. And so they made a special point of killing children. In the creche, there was one little boy who was an orphan because Jewish families who were desperate to save their kids, often in the countryside, left them at the doorsteps of churches or of people they thought would be sympathetic. And this little boy was discovered in this way. He was named by the staff, because no one knew his name, Rémi, after a famous French book about an orphan, and after the town that he was found in, Van Duinwijk. Duinwijk was the name of the village. And he was such a cute little boy. I have a picture of him in my slides. He was about 9 months old, just beginning to stand, and he became the favorite of the director of the Nazis, Ferdinand aus der Finden, who came every evening to talk to him and play with him. Meanwhile, other children were being, I have forgotten to say how this happened, but the children who were saved were taken at night out into the garden of the creche, and the next house over was actually a teacher's college run by a Christian activist, and he enlisted his students to help smuggle those kids out of Amsterdam. And so when the kids who were suitable were taken out in this way, if they were blonde, they went to the north of Holland to blend in with the Germanic folk there. If they were dark, they went to the south with the border of Belgium, where the theory was the French were darker. That's how profoundly racism influenced all the choices that were made. But little Rémi could not be saved because he was too well known to the Nazis. And so he was deported and killed with all the other children who could not make it through. All the children with disabilities came through there, all the orphans, and it became more and more desperate. So my mother was very active in the underground, even at that tender age. And by the time she was told that she was on a list for deportation, which was in the summer of 1943, she was all of 18, her parents suggested, because a neighbor had suggested, that maybe she could go to a place in the country where they'd heard they needed someone to help with the children. And so she disobeyed all the Jewish rules against Jews. You know, she didn't wear her Jewish star. She rode on a train. She went outside of the city where she was supposed to stay, and she stayed in an inn to see this couple. And the minute she saw them, they knew that they would turn. She knew that they would turn them in, and she would turn her in a minute. In fact, there was a system in Holland called kopgeld, where if that is the money per head that you could get for turning in a Jew, which was around $47, raised later when people were reluctant to do it. But that's one of the reasons that the statistics in Holland were so terrible. As a percentage of the population, the Jews were second only to Poland in the percentage who were killed in the Holocaust. And that is because of much betrayal. I'm running out of time already, aren't I? Anyway, my mother realized she had to leave, so she did one of her first escapes by sheet from the upstairs bedroom she was in, ran to the train station, took the first train back to Amsterdam, managed to dodge the Nazis, and walked the 45 minutes back to South Amsterdam to her apartment, where she found her parents had been taken in the night. That was July 23rd, 1943, the second to last raid on Amsterdam after it was declared Judenfrei, Jew-free. And my mother ran to their close friends who were not Jewish, the Scholtes. I'm trying to get them inscribed at Yad Vashem as we speak, who had been friends. They had been friends and become very close in all kinds of ways. And they immediately took her in, but she screamed that she wanted to go and find her parents. And they locked the house to keep her in. They were the parents of 3 young children, the youngest of whom has been a close friend of mine since my birth and is celebrating her 90th birthday this week. It was a great danger to them to do this, but they did it nonetheless. And eventually a postcard came. That was often the way that people being deported wrote postcards and sent them out of the trains, dropped them out of the trains in the hope someone would send them. And in this case, it did arrive at the Scholtes' house. And she said, "Tell H that she must not follow us." And then she stopped. And Jo Scholte, now there are a lot of Jo's in this story. My mother, Hilda's older brother, was called Jo, and he had disappeared for the whole previous year, but it turned out he was already working in the underground in Belgium. And Jo Scholte seemed to be in contact with him. This still remains mysterious how that worked. And he took my mother to Maastricht, which is a town that is a sort of southern border with Belgium, also very near France and even Germany. And she was supposed to meet her older brother Jo there, and they were supposed to cross over into Belgium. And they did, in fact, meet. This was now early August 1943. But Jo, my uncle, who was always he had a terrible sense of direction for someone in the underground. I mean, he was supposed to be shipping, fallen Allied sailors and Jews and other people who had wandered into that territory. He was supposed to get them to Spain, but he could never find the way to my house or anywhere else, as far as I could tell. So I don't quite know how he did it, but he missed the boat, literally. There was a boat supposed to meet them. So they had to swim across. This was well after midnight. It was now his birthday. And of course, the shores were lined with patrols, but they somehow swam across and made it, even though he developed a cramp midway, and my mother had to drag him and their belongings. I don't know quite how she did it. It's not that big a river, but it was very dangerous. And also to this day, it has a lot of cement. There are a lot of cement factories along there, and there was a lot of dangerous stuff in the water. Anyway, they made it to Belgium, and that's where my mother spent the next year. She was given a false identity. Her hair was dyed blonde. Everyone thought she was Christian and 4 years older than she was, which caused some very interesting complications in her social life. Of course, she could never say that she was Jewish. And she had a series of adventures in Belgium that involved many close escapes and close encounters. And I could tell you about them in great detail because they are fascinating. But many more escapes from windows, many more trips in carts filled with vegetables with false bottoms when farmers helped her escape from one place, and farmers helped her again when she had to escape again. But most of that year was spent in the company of the family called the Dupuis, who never knew that she was Jewish, but she became a housekeeper there. It's where she learned to cook, and I have been handed that gift from her, for better or for worse. I'm the oldest of 3 daughters, so all this fell on me. And she had a very close relationship with them all, which I'm happy to say was maintained very vividly after the war. But they were working in the underground too, the man of the house especially. And my mom used to go out as a courier and translator. And I would like to emphasize, although I don't think there are many young people here, the importance of languages. Both my uncle and she spoke 4 languages fluently: Dutch, German, French, and English. And they learned Yiddish very quickly when they were in the camps, which I'll come to later. So in her last place, she was asked to help a family where the mother had lost a child and was deeply depressed. And my mother, with her usual energy, restored them all to health. And there were many social relationships I won't go into. And then in the late August of 1944, they saw the American tanks and troops coming over the hills outside the village where she was then, near the French border, and they were liberated. And my mother thought she joined because she'd been so involved in the underground, she was invited to join the Belgian underground and handed a gun. And she said, "I'm not shooting anyone," which is in her nature very deeply. And they went to Brussels to try and find her brother, who they knew had been arrested. And she found a friend there who's, by the way, whose relatives live in Chelmsford, and I'm still in contact with. A friend there who helped her and told her that her brother was still in a prison camp. But the British had liberated Brussels, and soon enough he turned up, although he would have been shot the next week. So it was quite close. My uncle was quite a character, very theatrical. And though he's extremely tall and handsome and looked a lot like Nasser, no one ever suspected he was a Jew. So he was a prisoner of war there. He told them a tale. And he told us many other tales later. And then they worked with the Dutch forces because the battle was not quite over in Belgium. The Battle of the Bulge was still ahead. And they worked at getting victims out of minefields, which is not a very safe profession, but they did that near the Dutch border. The Dutch, unfortunately, had the hunger winter ahead of them when everyone else had been liberated, but that's a whole other story. How am I doing for time so far? Okay, so I'm talking as fast as I can. Unfortunately, my uncle was arrested again while he was out on what was called recce. The Germans were still around, and they arrested him again, unfortunately. And my mother, at that point, decided to join the British Red Cross in Antwerp because that area was still they had more rockets falling on that one city, V2 rockets from the Germans, than all the rockets that were sent to Britain. And so she was going to go there and help with the Red Cross. And she learned how to drive. In the brief time she was in Antwerp, she learned how to drive an ambulance, a motorcycle, a Jeep, and various other, proved very useful, other vehicles. But no sooner had she gotten there, really, than a desperate call came out from the British. The British had liberated Bergen-Belsen on April 15th, and they could not cope with what they had there. 60,000 people dead on the ground, many more dying in all the huts and so on. So they had a call out for all British ambulances to head there. My mother, it took a long time. She had to go south and then north because they went through the front lines and then into an unbelievably undisturbed rural Germany, which was quite difficult. And when they got to Bergen-Belsen, you could smell the smell of typhus 3 miles out. And that's where she spent the next 2 years. She was the only woman allowed into the horror camp, which is where all the Jews were, because she spoke 4 languages and the English couldn't speak to anybody. That's still true of all of us, isn't it? So she also was looking for her parents. She had no idea what had happened to them. And the first job was separating the living from the dead and then treating those who were living. And then as time went on, she set up, with the help of a Quaker friend from America, a network to get relatives in touch with each other from other concentration camps. And before just after she died and before her funeral, these letters were returned to me, in which she talked incredibly about that period. And she said, I would love to go to, I don't know what will happen to me. I'd love to go to America, but I don't think that's likely. And never mind, I know things will work out somehow. And that was her spirit. She was cheerful, she was humorous, she was devastated. And that's a combination I feel within my own heart, and why it's so hard for me to sit through this service. I'm sure it's very hard for the survivors too. Anyway, she was there for 2 years after the first deaths were over. I have pictures of that. That went on and on. It was a time for rehabilitation. The British were not letting anybody go. There was a very anti-Semitic administration at that point, and certainly not to Palestine. So they were stuck there, and all the Jews who had been sent home to the Eastern European countries, encountered pogroms and the theft of their houses and all that, and they all came running back as the Iron Curtain fell. So my mother began her second job, the one that she was best at. She set up a baby's house for the very malnourished children who had survived and who had come back. And she set up this wonderful daycare center because it was staffed entirely by the people in the camp who had many skills. And they all went to work, and some of the artists covered the walls with paintings. The ones who were trained in childcare helped with that. The cooks cooked. And soon she was feeding not only the little kids, but also their families. And at this point in the second year, am I still all right? In the second year of the time at Belsen, I forgot to say that one of the first things she did was go to the Dutch house where the girls were. That wasn't a house, it was just open space, really. She went to talk to the Dutch women to find out there what had happened, and they told her that Margot and Anna had died just a few weeks before. And shortly after that, she had to leave where she saw Otto, because Otto was staying on the same street as she was with her friends, the ones I mentioned. And she thought she was the first one to tell him about this, but in fact, those girls had come back just before. And Otto and my mother became like father and daughter, because Margot looked very much like my mother and was almost the same age. And their birthdays were only a few days apart. And he became my godfather, and our whole family knew him very well until he died. And through that, I got to know Eva Schloss, who just died as well, his stepdaughter. Anyway, on with the story. So this strange Swiss man arrived in the second year to be the camp doctor, and this turned out to be my father. He was called Max Goldberg. He was thought to be anti-Semitic with a name like Goldberg. I still laugh about that, because he didn't know how to speak English very well, and he kept insulting everyone inadvertently. When the doctor said, oh, Dr. Goldberg, the outgoing doctor said, oh, Dr. Goldberg, why don't you come and have dinner with us? He said, must I? He thought that was very polite, but they all thought it was terrible. And eventually, at a party, because you have to remember this was a group of young people under the most amazing emotional circumstances, and men overwhelmingly outnumbered women. So it was all rather exciting. There's a lot of that in my book. Although my mother was a total innocent, she had many, many admirers. And when Max appeared on the scene, they all warned her off him. But she fell in love with him because he tripled and quadrupled the milk rations for the children by using dead people's names. And how can you not fall in love with someone like that? And then eventually at a party, they realized they had German in common, and suddenly he became a different person to her. And so they eventually, had a sort of complicated courtship, but eventually, when all this came to an end, she worked first as a lieutenant with the British Army, and then became a lieutenant with what's the Jewish organization that was active there? I've just blanked on it, but you know. No, not that one. I know perfectly well, I've just blanked. But anyway, so there were a lot of very many young people, all very dedicated, and people also pushing for the settlement of Israel. In fact, they got to know the wife of one of the early prime ministers of Israel, because she was there too. And eventually, all this came to an end when all these things sort of dried up, because although there was a very active population there, still tens of thousands of people, they couldn't get anywhere right away. And their jobs, my mother's job and my father's, sort of came to an end, and they married back in Switzerland in 1947. I would like to point out at this point that my grandparents on both sides, that is my mother's grandparents, who were respectively from Eastern Europe and from the heartland of Germany, were stateless and were made stateless twice by the Nazis, of course. And when they came to Amsterdam, there was no chance of becoming a citizen, which may sound familiar. Because when you are fleeing from a country that's very difficult, you are scared when you arrive in the new country, and you have to earn your living, first of all. And the requirements are very severe in all these countries. It was also true on my father's side, although he had been born in Basel. I was listed, when I was born in Basel, as a citizen of a tiny village in Poland where my grandfather had been born, because there's no birthright citizenship in Switzerland, or there wasn't then. And I hope we're all thinking about that. So all my grandparents were stateless. My parents were stateless, and that took a lot of time to organize their wedding. My father still had to appear as a Pole, although he didn't know a word of Polish, had never been in Poland. They married, and then shortly after that, representatives from the future Jewish state arrived and asked if they would come to Israel to fight in the War of 48. And they said yes, like brave young idiots, I think. But they said they would serve as a doctor and nurse team and never be separated, and they wanted to be on the front lines. Now, that is hard to imagine after what they'd already been through. So they went to Israel, and they had many adventures there. My father was eventually badly injured when an Iraqi bomb came through the little surgical corner they had on the front line of a village called Sedjara in Israel. And news came to the field hospital where my mother was working, right behind the front line, that there were two doctors up there, an English doctor and a Swiss doctor, and they didn't know which one had been killed. And my mother thought, not again, this is how my life is going to be. But then the cardboard ambulance that came down the hill, because at that point they had very little actual substance, they managed to survive the Iraqi fire. I don't know how. And then she saw my father's head stick up, and he said, "Hallo Hildchen," which was his nickname for her. And her breath returned to her body. And he had a long recuperation, at the end of which they celebrated by conceiving me, as I was never allowed to forget. Now, that's not much of a burden, is it? I mean, the phoenix rising from the ashes, yes, that's a lot to live up to. And I'm not sure I've done that. But my book contains a lot more about my sisters and me and how we felt about all this. And they returned to Switzerland, where she had me, and they were there for just a few months. And then my father realized he would never have a future as a doctor in Switzerland because of anti-Semitism. And they decided to go to America because one of the doctors he'd worked with back in Belsen was willing to sponsor him. So we came legitimately in 1950 when I was 9 months old, but we were still stateless. And the only time my father was then drafted in the Korean conflict, but luckily ended up in Frankfurt, which luckily or unluckily, I think it was horrendous for my mother. It was by then only 1952, not very close to the end of the war. We were there for 2 years, and my father got his citizenship some years after that. He was working as an army psychiatrist. And my mother and I were eventually also allowed to become citizens, but I was about 8. And to tell you the truth, I hope there's not an ICE person here. I'm still not sure where my papers are, because when I applied for the vote, with my 18-year-old sister, and the voting age had just been lowered to 18. I was 21, and they had to send to Toronto for me to find my voting papers. So I don't know where they are now, but I do have a passport, so I think it's okay. Anyway, so they ended up in America, where my mother founded a daycare center that was free for all poor children. It's still it was the best daycare center I've ever seen in my life. When my mother died, and they died in the same year in 2015, all these psychiatrists who had fancy educations, who had worked with my mother, said, "We thought we were so great, and what did this woman with no education know about children?" But in fact, we learned everything we know from her, and it changed our entire practice. And she was such a wonderful mother to me because she'd nursed thousands of kids, so I didn't have to. She was very, she didn't have all these fixations about what food you had or when you did what this or that. She had seen everything, and she was a very supportive mother. And my father, meanwhile, who doesn't get the credit he should, was a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst and treated many patients for free. But that never stopped them from criticizing their new country that they loved and doing exactly what we're all doing now. So I think the moral of the story, I can't believe I got through it without being, I expected the rabbi perhaps to give me a kick or something. My mother was a very joyful person. That was also true for my father, both very humorous, and even in the depths of her sorrow, and this is not to make light of what we've been saying, she found things to love and enjoy, although she always said she compartmentalized that part of her life, and we saw that. It was very difficult, and it certainly had an effect on us, which we were not allowed to mention. We felt too guilty to mention until much later. So I think the moral is, never fear the stranger. The stranger is you, and you have the same obligation to him or her as you have to your own family. And that's where I'll stop. Thank you very much for listening to this. I should say my grandparents were murdered at Auschwitz. I forgot to say that.
Thank you so much. And I know that there are slides that we'll be able to see later, and also copies of Rita's book will be available as well. It's an amazing story, and I think the lesson I learned from it is just the indomitable nature of the human spirit, and to be able to just have so much courage to just go on and on and on and do everything you possibly can in the most dire of circumstances to make life better for others. So I think we all have to be practicing that spirit right now.
Can I say one thing? There's no candle in front of Yugoslavia. I was going to do that on my way out. But sorry.
Yes, I noticed that also. I don't know what happened there. And Rita will be available during the Oneg to talk more about the story. So now we're going to continue with the closing prayers of our service. The Elena on page 11. Please rise in body or spirit.
Aleinu l'sabeach la'adon ha'kol, latet gedula liyotzer bereshit, shelo asanu kigoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkenu kahem, v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam, va'anachnu korim umishtachavim ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Please be seated.
And please join me at the top of page 12.
שהוא נוטש שמיים ויוסר הארץ ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומי הוא אלוהינו אין עוד אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו ככתוב בתורתו וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל והארץ מתחת אין עוד.
And join me as we sing V'ne'emar and Bayom Ha.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד אחד ושמו אחד אחד ושמו אחד
We have lived in numerous towns and villages. In too many of them, we have endured cruel suffering. Some we have forgotten, others are sealed in our memory, a wound that does not heal. 100 generations of victims and martyrs, still their blood cries out from the earth. And so many at Dachau, at Buchenwald, at Babi Yar, and so many other places. What can we say? What can we do? How bear the unbearable or accept what life has brought to our peoples, to many peoples? All who are born must die, but how can we compare the slow passage of our time with the callous slaughter of the innocent, cut off before their time? They have left their stories and their lives to us. Let a million prayers rise whenever we worship. Let a million candles glow against the darkness of these unfinished lives. Sanctifying the name of God, we do honor to their memory. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at the season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own. We recall Adam Applebaum, who died during this past week. We add to his name the names of those whose yahrzeits or anniversary of whose deaths occur this week. Batya Klein, Louis Halpern, Irving Harrow, Daniel Rosenbaum, Herb Gindlin, Sylvia Kornetsky, Royal Schweiger, Karl Kessler. And at this time, if there are names of others you'd like us to keep in our hearts and our minds, in addition to the 6 million and the 11 million, you may say their names aloud or in your hearts as I look across the room.
Sarah Levy, who died in Teresian.
John Shelby.
Zichronam livracha, may all of their memories be for a blessing. We turn to page 13 as we rise in body or spirit to recite the Kaddish prayer. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei rabbah, v'yalma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'yizman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekudesha barichu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who causes peace to reign in the high heavens let peace descend on us, on our country, on all Israel and all the world, as we say together, Amen. Please be seated. I'd now like to call on Robin Frisch, our temple president, for the announcements.
Thank you. And before I start the announcements, I just have to say, as I'm sure we all feel, thank you from our hearts. I think we all felt just about every emotion that you could feel as you told your incredible stories, and they're inspirational and powerful, and I'm sure we'll all never forget and will help inspire us to do better ourselves. So thank you. Announcements coming up. On Sunday, April 19th, the Brotherhood Brunch at the Tavern on the Square. So please RSVP to Michael Singer. On Wednesday, April 22nd, is the Ping Pong Club from 7 to 9. And please contact Michael Finkel if you have any questions. On Sunday, April 26th, we're looking very forward to the Sisterhood Brunch. That'll be from 11 to 1, and contact Alicia McGee for any information or to RSVP. May 1st is a Simply Shabbat, which is always a special evening just to reflect and enjoy the beauty of Shabbat at 7 p.m. May 2nd, we have the last one of this year, Shabbat Yeladim Children's Shabbat, that I know children and families have enjoyed so much with our cantor Ben Silver and with Miss Rhonda. And then May 15th, the Bernard Nelson Award Service, where we'll be honoring Jen Snyder for all that she has done. And thank you once again. Thank you once again, Rita, and Shabbat Shalom.
I also want to thank Rita. You did not go on too long. She was so afraid of that. You were fine. I know you were terrified. You made it through and did it beautifully. So thank you again. And I wanted to thank my colleagues so much for being here. Reverend Catherine Adams, Reverend John Castricum, Reverend Sharon Dickinson, Reverend Jamie Hitzen-Rieger, and Reverend Trina Portillo, who will be doing our benediction this evening. And I also wanted to thank our Middlesex District Attorney, Marion Ryan, and our State Rep, Ken Gordon, for helping us to lead the service as well. And our First Lady of our district, Brina Gordon. I always have to add you to that. So we're now going to continue with the blessings over the Kiddush and the Motzi on page 14. Please rise. Shelley, why don't you come on up and lead us in the blessings?
Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Amen.
That's all there is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I wanted to add that Reverend Andrew Harris, our good friend and next door neighbor, was going to be here. I told him he was not allowed because his wife is about to give birth at any second. So I said, even if you want to come, I'm not letting you in the door. And we'll continue with the Motzi.
Anybody coming up? No.
No.
Take off for-
No. Just.
Please join me.
Motzi lechem min haaretz. We give thanks to God for bread. Our voices rise in song together as our joyful prayer is said. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
I would like to invite Reverend Portillo to come on over for our final blessing.
One of the blessings we often use in our tradition at our church is from the Torah. So I leave you with these words. May the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift up his face and make his countenance to shine upon you. The Lord look upon you with favor and grant you peace this day and forever. Amen.
We'll conclude our service with on the last page, let there be peace on earth.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be with God our Creator. Peacemakers we will be. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Yes, it was.